It all started innocently enough. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Lauren, my daughter, and her husband Charlie had been staying with me for the past few weeks. It was a big change, having them here in my quiet, solitary home. But family was family. And when Lauren called me, saying they needed a place to stay after Charlie lost his job, I couldn't say no. Charlie had always been, well, different. He wasn't the warmest guy, but then again, not everyone gets along with their in-laws. I tried not to judge him too harshly, but something about him always rubbed me the wrong way. He told us that he lost his job due to some layoffs at his company, and I believed him, at least at first. But the more he spoke about it, the more his story seemed like it didn't quite add up. He'd worked there for years, long enough to have built some security, but suddenly, a mass layoff hit? I don't know. There was just something about his tone, like he was trying a little too hard to make it sound like everything was fine. That he didn't care. Still, Lauren was my daughter. She's my little girl, no matter how old she gets. I trust her, and she trusted him. She said Charlie was trying to get back on his feet, and I wanted to help. So I opened my door to them. I gave them a place to stay while Charlie figured things out. But the longer they stayed, the more I began to feel something wasn't right. There was an unease in the air, a tension that seemed to follow Charlie around the house. It wasn't just the situation. Living under someone else's roof after losing a job can be stressful, but there was something deeper in his mannerisms, something that made my skin crawl when he wasn't looking. Charlie had this air of arrogance about him, like he thought he was smarter than everyone in the room, like he knew more than I did, just because I was older. And for someone who had just lost his job, he sure acted like he had everything figured out. He was always talking about his plans to get back on track, but it all sounded too rehearsed, too perfect. It wasn't just the way he carried himself or the way he spoke. It was in the little things, questions he asked that seemed harmless at first, but looking back were a little too personal, too pointed. One evening, during dinner, when Lauren was filling us in on some new hobby she'd picked up, Charlie casually asked me, "What kind of lock does your safe have upstairs?" It was the way he asked it, like it was no big deal. A normal question. I nearly dropped my fork. I was taken off guard. The safe? Why would he want to know that? But before I could even process the question, Lauren nearly choked on her water. "Charlie, what kind of question is that?" she asked, half laughing, half coughing. But I saw it. I saw that look in Charlie's eyes, that little glimmer of something, like a predator sizing up its prey. It was subtle, but it was there. The same look I had seen countless times in people who thought they were smarter than the old man. People who thought they could pull one over on me. I'd lived long enough to know when something wasn't right. I might not be able to move as quickly as I once did, but my instincts? They were still sharp. And Charlie? Well, Charlie was testing the waters. He was probing, trying to see what I knew, what I had, and how far he could push. But I wasn't about to let him know how much I was paying attention. I kept my face neutral, but inside, my mind was racing. I had to play it cool. So I asked, "What, are you worried about break-ins?" Charlie smiled, a little too wide. "Oh, just curious," he said, as if it was no big deal. He tried to brush it off, but I could tell he wasn't done. "You know, with all the break-ins in the area lately," he trailed off like he was making small talk. But something in the back of my mind clicked. Break-ins? We lived in a quiet neighborhood. The most excitement we had was Mrs. Henderson's cat getting stuck in a tree last month. That was it. I raised an eyebrow. What break-ins? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I haven't heard anything about that. Charlie waved his hand dismissively, like I was making too much of it. Oh, you probably don't hear about them. Just don't want to cause a panic. But that was the moment I knew. He wasn't asking about break-ins. He was fishing. He wasn't concerned about neighborhood security. He was looking for something. He wanted to know how I locked things up, where I kept my valuables, and most importantly, he wanted to know how he could get his hands on them. I smiled faintly and changed the subject, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. I spent the rest of the night listening to Charlie's voice in my head, replaying that question over and over. Why would he ask about my safe? He didn't seem like the kind of guy to ask about security just for the sake of curiosity. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling in for the night. But my thoughts kept circling back to that question. What kind of lock does your safe have upstairs? I turned it over in my mind. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Charlie wasn't just worried about break-ins. He wasn't asking out of concern. He was planning something much more personal. My instincts told me he was fishing for information, trying to figure out where my money was, how he could get to it, and how he could take it from me. I wasn't going to let that happen. As I lay there in the dark, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let him think he could outsmart me. Not now, not ever. I wasn't going to be the fool in this situation. I had to watch him, watch everything he did. Because Charlie's plan? It wasn't just about money, it was about trust. And he was about to lose that trust. I would keep my eyes open. I'd stay one step ahead, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The very next day, things took a strange turn. I hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something wasn't right, ever since Charlie's offhand question about the safe the night before. I spent the entire day distracted, trying to go about my usual routines, but my mind kept circling back to that moment at dinner. Charlie's probing questions, his smooth, casual demeanor, it was like he was testing me, seeing how much I knew, how much I'd let slip. I went to bed that night, exhausted from a long day, but I couldn't fall asleep immediately. Maybe it was the tension in the air. Maybe it was the unease I'd felt all day. Or maybe it was just the fact that I had too much on my mind. Either way, sleep didn't come easy. As I lay there in the dark, the house settled around me, the creaks and groans of the old place familiar and comforting. But then I started hearing something I hadn't heard before. Footsteps. Soft, light footsteps moving around upstairs. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe Charlie was just tossing and turning, still not feeling well, as he had claimed earlier. He had been up there for almost an hour after all, but the longer I listened, the more something gnawed at me. I told myself it was probably nothing. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it felt like the air itself was thick with anticipation. The house had that quiet hum to it, the kind you get when something's just slightly off. I lay there, eyes wide open, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on me. My ears strained for more sounds, but the house had gone still again, except for those soft, deliberate steps. After a few minutes of listening, I couldn't take it any longer. I got out of bed and quietly padded down the hall. I didn't want to make a sound, just in case Charlie was still moving around upstairs, and I crept up the stairs one step at a time, trying to keep my movements light. I was just checking on him, nothing more. But deep down, I had this uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. When I reached the top of the stairs, I paused. I could hear Charlie moving around in his room. No sound of distress, no loud noises, just the soft shuffle of footsteps. I knew he was in there, but something felt off. Why had he been up there for so long? He had said he wasn't feeling well, but he hadn't come down for a drink or anything. I approached his bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. That alone was enough to raise my suspicions. I always made sure my door was shut, always. It was a habit I'd developed over years of living alone, especially when I wasn't expecting anyone. But tonight, it was open just a crack. Barely enough to notice, but enough to make me pause. I stood there for a moment, listening. The house was eerily quiet now, except for the faint creak of the floorboards under my feet as I shifted my weight. I hesitated, unsure of what I might find, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. I had to know. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open slowly, just enough to peek inside. It didn't creak. It wasn't supposed to creak. The hinges were oiled, silent from years of use. But as I stepped into the room, something about the scene before me hit me all at once. Nothing looked out of place at first. Charlie was sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to me. The bed was made neatly, the nightstand in its usual place, untouched. But then I saw it. A small detail. One I almost missed if I hadn't been paying attention. The second drawer of my dresser was slightly open. Not wide open, just a crack. Barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I'd always kept it closed. Always. In fact, I had a system. My things were organized, every drawer and cabinet in its place. So seeing that second drawer ajar, out of the ordinary, immediately set my nerves on edge. It wasn't the kind of thing that happened in my house. My things were sacred, private. I'd never left them exposed, especially not with strangers, or in this case, with family, staying under my roof. I froze for a moment, my heart starting to race. Had Charlie gone through my things? Why? And more importantly, what was he looking for? I walked closer to the dresser, keeping my movement slow, deliberate, not wanting to alert him if he heard me. I didn't want him to know I'd discovered what he had been up to. I reached the dresser and paused, taking in the subtle changes. The drawer that had been left open, the way it had been pushed in a little too carelessly. I pulled the drawer open fully, just far enough to see the contents. Inside were old documents. Nothing special, just insurance papers, some old bank statements, things I hadn't looked at in years. But they were always kept in the same order. They were mine, private, and I didn't want anyone touching them. And that's when I saw it. The one thing that made everything snap into focus. The small brass key I kept taped under the drawer's lip. It was gone. I couldn't believe it at first. I checked again, running my fingers along the smooth wood of the drawer, feeling for any hidden corners where it might have slipped under. But there was nothing. The key was gone. The key that opened my safe, where I kept everything important. And I knew exactly what that meant. Charlie had found it. He had been in my room, rifling through my things, looking for the key, and now he knew exactly where to go next. My blood ran cold, and a rush of anger surged through me. This wasn't random. It wasn't some curious slip-up. This was intentional. Charlie hadn't just been asking questions. He had been planning. He had been looking for something specific. He knew about the key, and now he knew exactly how to get into the safe. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The room felt smaller suddenly. like it was closing in on me. The weight of the discovery hit me hard. Charlie hadn't just been a visitor in my home. He'd been a thief in the making. I closed the drawer carefully, making sure everything was exactly as it had been before. I didn't want to tip him off that I'd discovered his plan, but I knew, deep down, I couldn't ignore this. I couldn't let him get away with it. Charlie had just made his first mistake. He'd underestimated me, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I turned and walked out of the room quietly, my mind racing. Tomorrow, I would start planning. Charlie thought he was clever, but he hadn't counted on me being just as sharp. I was going to make sure he learned that some people, no matter how old they are, can still outsmart the ones who think they know better. Tonight, I had learned more than I needed to know. Charlie wasn't just some man staying under my roof. He was a threat, and now I had to protect myself and Lauren from him. I had the pieces now. I just needed to put them together. That night, after dinner, the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. I couldn't shake the sensation that Charlie was studying me, measuring my every move, watching my reactions, seeing what I would say or do next. It was in the way he kept looking at me, always a little too closely, as though he was waiting for me to reveal something he was hoping to find. His questions about the house, the safe, the key, those had been no accident. I had asked myself countless times, what was he really after? A safe is just a lock, a mechanism. But the key to that safe? That was something far more valuable. It wasn't just about the money or the jewels inside. It was about power, control, and access. And I knew deep down that Charlie wasn't asking questions out of simple curiosity. He was probing, testing, trying to figure out how to get his hands on what was mine. I had tried to dismiss it at first. I wanted to believe that maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe I was just paranoid. After all, I wasn't exactly a spring chicken anymore. I had spent years living alone, and I was set in my ways. But this felt different. Charlie wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what he was doing. I didn't need to be an expert to see that. And that made me even more determined to pay attention, to observe, to listen. So I did what anyone in my position would do. I became more vigilant. I started watching him more closely. Every movement, every word, every glance. It wasn't just the questions about the safe anymore. It was everything. From the way Charlie casually asked about my bank accounts to the way he lingered around the house, his eyes scanning, as though he was looking for something specific. He knew I had something of value hidden away, and he was determined to get to it. But what was he really after? Was it the money? The contents of the safe? Or was it something deeper? I had to know. I decided it was time. I was going to confront him, but not in a way that would make him suspicious. I had to do it subtly. I had to keep my cards close to my chest, let him think he was still in control, still ahead of the game. So, while Lauren and I sat at the table one evening, I decided to steer the conversation in a direction that would give me the answers I needed. "So how's the job search going?" I asked casually, watching his reaction closely. Charlie shifted in his seat, a small nervous tick in his jaw that I caught out of the corner of my eye. He paused for a moment as though considering how to respond. He wasn't expecting that question. Not like that. "Oh, he replied, his voice flat. "It's been tough. Lots of layoffs in the industry. It's a hard time for everyone, I guess." It wasn't the answer I was hoping for, but it was the same answer I had heard him give before. Vague, unclear. The story he had told Lauren. The one that didn't quite add up, no matter how many times he repeated it. His eyes kept darting over to me as he spoke. They were calculating, sharp. It was like he was testing me, trying to see if I would buy the story again. He was probing for something. The whole conversation felt rehearsed, like he was playing a role. And then, without warning, he asked about the key again. "The one in your dad's bedroom drawer," Charlie said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How do you know about that key?" His tone was casual, almost too casual. But I wasn't fooled. It was like he was slipping, making a mistake in his act, revealing more than he intended. I didn't answer immediately. I let the question hang in the air for a moment, letting the tension build. I wanted him to feel the weight of his words, to realize that he was getting too close to the truth. Slowly, I set down my glass and met his gaze. "How do you know about that key?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended, my tone sharp enough to cut through the silence between us. For a split second, I saw it. The mask slipped. His eyes darkened, and I could see the cold, calculating look flash across his face. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a forced smile. It was too late. I had seen it. I knew exactly what it meant. I was looking for aspirin," Charlie said, trying to brush it off. "I accidentally opened the wrong drawer." His explanation was weak, flimsy. It didn't add up. I had already been in that room. I knew the layout, and I knew there was no way he could have accidentally opened the wrong drawer, especially when he had been up there for so long. He had been searching for something. He had been looking for that key. And now, he was trying to cover it up. I could feel my blood start to boil. I wasn't an old fool. I wasn't going to let him think I was. I knew what was going on. He had been in my room, rifling through my things. And now, he was trying to spin a lie to cover it up. I didn't say anything more. I didn't need to. The truth was staring us both in the face. And Charlie knew it. I could see the discomfort in his eyes, the way he shifted in his seat, like he was trying to find a way out. But there was no escape now. I didn't need to press him any further. I could see the guilt on his face, feel the tension thickening the air between us. And I knew that from that moment on, I couldn't trust him. Not anymore. Charlie had been careful up until now. But the cracks were starting to show. He was getting sloppy. His plan was unraveling, and it was only a matter of time before I exposed it all. I leaned back in my chair, watching him closely. I wasn't about to let him know how much I had figured out. Not yet. I needed to play it cool, keep my cards close to my chest. But in that moment, I knew something he didn't. I was on to him. Charlie had made his first mistake, and I wasn't about to let him make another one. I wasn't going to let this go, not after everything that had happened. Charlie had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to stand by and let him think he could outsmart me. He had underestimated me in the worst possible way, and now it was my turn to make sure he realized just how wrong he was. Charlie had already shown his true colors, his questions, his attempts to invade my privacy, and his blatant manipulation of Lauren. Everything pointed to one thing. He wasn't here for a second chance at life. Not really. He wasn't trying to rebuild after a job loss. No, Charlie was after something much more. He was after control, my control, and my money. He thought he could get away with it because I was older, quieter, someone who wouldn't notice the small changes, the subtle shifts in behavior. But he was wrong. I could feel it in my bones that I couldn't just let him get away with this. I couldn't let him use my daughter as a pawn in his scheme, especially after everything I had done for them. He was taking advantage of her trust and my own. So I made a decision. I decided to set a trap. I had always been good at reading people. I spent decades in the insurance world where I learned the art of observation, how to spot lies, how to notice small details that others missed. That experience was going to serve me well now. Charlie didn't know it, but I had access to something much more powerful than he ever imagined. He thought he could manipulate me, but what he didn't realize was that I had the upper hand all along. It was time to use my knowledge and experience to turn the tables. I knew I couldn't just confront him directly, not yet. If I did, he would just deny everything and try to cover his tracks even more. No, I needed to gather evidence. I needed proof, something concrete that would expose him for the fraud he really was. It had to be something so clear, so undeniable, that there would be no room for excuses, no way for him to talk his way out of it. The plan took shape in my mind over the next few days. I had to be methodical. It was going to require precision, patience, and a steady hand. Charlie had been in my room before, and he would be back again. He was too eager, too desperate. I knew he couldn't resist coming back to finish what he had started. He'd already scoped out the safe. Now, it was only a matter of time before he tried to open it. So I started preparing, quietly, stealthily. I couldn't let him know I was onto him, not yet. I spent the next few days setting things up, slowly, carefully. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed a decoy, something that would distract him long enough for me to expose his true intentions. It was simple, really. I needed a glitter bomb. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself as the idea took shape. It was a perfect plan. A little humor, a little justice, and a whole lot of glitter. He would never see it coming. And when it happened, he wouldn't just be caught red-handed, he'd be caught sparkling. A walking, glitter-covered testament to his own greed and stupidity. But I didn't rush into it. I was meticulous in my preparation. The glitter bomb had to be perfect. Just the right amount of pressure, just the right timing. I couldn't afford any mistakes. I placed the trap in the second drawer of my dresser, the one Charlie had opened the night I discovered he'd been snooping through my things. It was exactly where he would expect to find the key. The perfect location. He wouldn't even think twice about it. I carefully filled the small cannon with glitter, choosing a mix of silver and gold. They would shimmer in the light, coating him from head to toe. I wanted to make sure it would be impossible to clean up. Once he set off the trap, there would be no denying what he had done. The glitter would stick to him like a permanent reminder of his betrayal. The timing had to be precise. I knew he would likely try again to get into my room when Lauren and I were downstairs. He was getting more brazen. Every day I could see the look in his eyes grow more desperate. He needed that key. He needed access to the safe, and he was willing to do anything to get it. I took extra care to ensure the drawer would close perfectly, that the glitter cannon would trigger only when he reached in with the right amount of force. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had the advantage of years of experience, and Charlie had the arrogance of someone who thought he could pull off a perfect crime. After I set the trap, I spent the next few days preparing for the moment when Charlie would make his move. I watched him closely, paying attention to every small shift in his behavior. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. His eyes followed me when I walked through the house, always lingering just a little too long. He didn't realize it, but every time he looked at me, I could see the gears turning in his mind. He was planning, scheming, trying to figure out when the right time would be to strike. But he had no idea that the game had already shifted. The trap was set, and all I had to do was wait. I couldn't afford to slip up now. Everything had to go exactly as planned. The next move was his. But when he reached for that key, he would find something else entirely. Something that would expose him for the thief he was, and maybe, just maybe, wake him up to the fact that he was dealing with someone far smarter and more experienced than he had ever imagined. Charlie wasn't going to win, not this time, and when the glitter hit, I'd be ready. The night before I knew Charlie would make his move, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't that I wasn't exhausted. My body ached from the weight of the past few days, the endless tension that hung between me and Charlie. But the closer I got to the moment when I'd finally catch him, the more my mind raced. Thoughts kept flashing through my head, one after another, like a never-ending loop. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, trying to push away the images of Lauren's face, the way she had looked at Charlie when I had exposed his manipulation, the betrayal, the pain. I kept thinking about how she'd been used as a cover for his plan, how he had taken advantage of her trust without a second thought. How had I not seen it sooner? I had been so quick to help them, to open up my home. When Lauren called me, asking if they could stay for a while because of Charlie's job loss, I hadn't hesitated. I offered them a place to stay without a second thought. I wanted to help, to be there for her, because she was my daughter. Family. That's what family does. I thought I was doing the right thing, offering support, believing the best in people. I never once suspected that I was letting a thief into my home. But now, everything had changed. I felt the weight of my mistake pressing on me. Charlie had lied to me, had lied to my daughter, and in doing so, he had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I had trusted him because he was family. But family didn't lie to each other. Family didn't plot to steal from one another. Family didn't manipulate those they loved for their own gain. As the night dragged on, I found myself thinking about the first few days when they arrived. How Charlie had acted like everything was fine. How he played the part of the dutiful son-in-law. He was always so polite, so charming, but there was something underneath that charm. Something cold, calculating. He wasn't just looking for a place to stay. He was looking for a way in, a way to get what he thought was rightfully his. I had been so blinded by my desire to help, to offer a safe place for my daughter and her husband, that I never questioned the things and that didn't add up. The vague answers about the job search, the constant questions about my finances, my security system, the safe in my room. The way Charlie always seemed to know just a little too much about my routines, about what I had. I had trusted him, and I had let my guard down. But now I knew better. I had seen the signs, the way he watched me, the way he would drop a question or comment that seemed innocent on the surface, but was loaded with meaning. He had been plotting. He had been calculating, and I had been too trusting to see it. Now, as I lay in bed, the calm before the storm hung heavily in the air. I could feel it, deep in my gut. Tomorrow would be the day. Charlie was going to make his move. He was going to try and take what he thought was his. What he believed I wouldn't notice was missing. But that's where he was wrong. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wasn't going to let him ruin everything for my daughter and for me. I had spent the last few days preparing. I had set the trap. I had done everything I could to make sure that when Charlie made his move, he would be caught. And when that glitter bomb went off, it wasn't just going to mark him physically. It was going to expose him for who he truly was: a liar, a thief, and someone who thought he could outsmart me. I had everything I needed. I had the evidence, I had the plan, and most importantly, I had my mind. Charlie had underestimated me. He had thought I was too old, too slow, too easy to manipulate. But he was wrong. And tomorrow he would see just how wrong he was. I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop racing. The house was still and silent, but my thoughts were loud, like a drumbeat in my head. The sound of Charlie moving around upstairs earlier that day echoed in my ears. What was he planning? Did he think I hadn't noticed his nervous glances? Did he think I didn't know what he was after? I turned on my side, pulling the blankets tight around me, but sleep wouldn't come. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. I was focused. This was it. Tomorrow, Charlie was going to learn just how wrong he was to think I wouldn't notice, to think I wouldn't fight back. I thought about Lauren again, about how much she loved Charlie, how much she had trusted him. I had to do this for her too. She didn't deserve to be used, manipulated, or hurt by someone she loved. And if I could stop it, if I could expose Charlie's plan, then maybe, just maybe, she would see him for what he truly was. The clock ticked loudly in the room. Each second felt like an eternity. But I knew the waiting was almost over. Tomorrow, Charlie would make his move, and when he did, I would be ready. I had no intention of letting him steal from me or my daughter. I closed my eyes, letting the silence of the night wrap around me like a cloak. I wasn't going to let him win. Tomorrow would be his last chance to make a move. And when it was over, he would wish he had never crossed me. I was prepared. The trap was set, and Charlie was about to learn that not all old men are easy targets. Some of us still have a few tricks left up our sleeves, and tomorrow the game would be over. The moment had arrived. After all the days of planning, the waiting, the quiet observations, and the careful preparations, I knew that Charlie's time was up. He had been so careful, so calculated in his movements, but he had no idea that I was a step ahead. In his mind, he was a master schemer, and I was just an old man who wouldn't notice the subtle changes, the small signs that something was amiss. But I wasn't fooled. Not for a second. That morning, as I sat down to breakfast, I could see it in his eyes. An excitement, a hunger, a look that screamed anticipation. He thought he was about to pull off the perfect crime. He was sure that I was oblivious to everything. But what he didn't realize was that I had been watching him carefully. His every move, his every word, his every glance. And now, as he sat across from me at the table, I knew the time had come. I played my part perfectly. I acted like the old man I was supposed to be, slow, distracted, the kind of person people think won't notice anything, the kind of person who is easy to deceive. I made sure to mention in a casual tone that I would be heading out for errands that day. I wanted to make sure the house was unguarded, the perfect opportunity for Charlie to make his move. But what Charlie didn't know was that I had set the stage for him. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I'd taken an extra step, one that he hadn't even considered. I had installed a small, discreet security camera in my bedroom, right where the action would unfold. It was a tiny device, no bigger than the palm of my hand, and it was nearly invisible. It connected to my phone, and from the moment I pressed the button, I could watch everything unfold in real time. Charlie wouldn't know it, but I was going to be right there watching him, watching him walk into my trap. I watched him as we sat there at breakfast. He was too eager, his eyes darting between me and Lauren, trying to appear casual, but I could see it. The nervous energy, the way his fingers drummed lightly against his coffee mug. He was ready. He thought today was the day he would finally get what he wanted. As I sipped my coffee, I could almost feel the tension in the room. Charlie was acting normal, too normal, but I knew it wasn't going to be long before he made his move. He'd been laying the groundwork for days, asking questions about my routine, about my security, about the safe. Today, he'd finally get his chance. I kept the conversation light, allowing him to think I was completely unaware of his intentions. I made small talk with Lauren about her plans for the day, her upcoming trip to the grocery store, while Charlie sat there, his gaze flicking nervously toward the hallway. I knew he was thinking about the bedroom, about the second drawer of my dresser, where the key to the safe lay in wait. I had positioned myself just right, acting like the tired old man I had become, but under the surface, my mind was sharp. I was ready. "I'll be out for a few hours," I mentioned casually, "just running a few errands." Charlie's eyes flickered. I saw the faintest twitch in his jaw. He didn't respond immediately, but I could tell he was already calculating the possibilities. He'd seen me head out the door countless times, but this time, he was eager. This time, he saw his opportunity to finally get his hands on what he thought he was entitled to. I could feel his gaze following me, his every move now more deliberate, more obvious. He didn't know it yet, but today would be his last chance. I wasn't leaving the house unguarded. Not at all. I had the security camera set up perfectly, positioned so that it would capture everything. The moment Charlie stepped into my room, the moment he reached for the key, the moment he triggered the trap. And when he did, when he set off that glitter bomb, I would have him. It was the perfect setup. Everything had been accounted for. The glitter bomb in the drawer, the camera hidden in plain sight, the timing down to the second. Charlie was walking right into my trap, and he didn't even know it. As I stood to gather my things, I kept my movement slow and deliberate, as if I had all the time in the world. I wanted to make sure Charlie felt confident, comfortable. I wanted him to believe that he was in control, that he was about to get what he had been waiting for. But as I turned to leave, I caught his eyes for a brief moment. His expression flickered, and I saw it. Just a flash of nervousness. He knew it was coming. He knew today was the day. And just like that, I walked out the door, leaving him behind with everything he thought he wanted. I wasn't worried. I had everything under control. I knew he'd try to get into the room the moment I was gone. And when he did, I'd be watching. Charlie was about to learn a hard lesson. He thought he could outsmart me, but the trap was set. And now there was no escape. That night, I lay in bed, pretending to sleep. The quiet of the house was almost unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every subtle shift of the old walls seemed amplified in the silence. The light from the street lamp outside filtered in through the curtains, casting long shadows on the floor. But I wasn't really seeing anything. My eyes were shut, my body still, but my mind was as sharp as ever. I had taken the sleeping pills Charlie had suggested, but they didn't dull the alertness in me. I had to stay calm, stay quiet. Tonight was the night. I had planned this moment for days, and everything was set. The trap was ready. The security camera was in place, silently recording everything, capturing Charlie's every move. The glitter bomb, positioned perfectly in the second drawer of my dresser, was just waiting to be triggered. I wasn't fooled by the pills I'd taken. No matter how drowsy they made me feel, my focus was razor sharp. I knew exactly what was happening, even if Charlie thought I was fast asleep. The house seemed to hold its breath as I lay there, counting the seconds in my head. Time passed slowly, but I knew the moment was approaching. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the distant murmur of the wind outside, but all those sounds seemed distant compared to the pounding in my chest. I was so close to the moment I had been waiting for. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard it, the faintest creak of the stairs. It was so slight, but it was there. The unmistakable sound of someone moving quietly, deliberately. I didn't need to look. I knew it was him. He was coming. He thought I was asleep. He thought he had me fooled. But I wasn't asleep. I was wide awake, watching him through the small camera I had hidden in my room, watching as he made his way up the stairs, taking each step with that same confident air. I held my breath. My fingers were curled into the blanket, my heart racing. I watched his every move on the screen, saw him approach my door. His steps were slow, calculated. He didn't know I was watching, but I knew exactly what he was planning. I heard him try the door handle quietly, almost testing it. The sound sent a chill down my spine. He was so sure of himself, so confident that I wouldn't notice, that he would slip in and out undetected, that I was just some easy mark, an old man too naive to protect his own things. But Charlie didn't know me. He didn't know the lengths I would go to protect what was mine, to expose him for what he truly was. I kept my breathing steady, my body still as stone. He was at the door now, hesitating, maybe wondering if I was really asleep or if I was just pretending. He didn't realize I was 2 steps ahead, watching him make his move. And then, as I heard him push the door open just a crack as he took his first step inside my room, the trap was sprung. The glitter bomb went off with a deafening whoosh, a burst of shimmering gold and silver, exploding into the air like a celebration gone horribly wrong. It was the moment I had been waiting for, and it was perfect. The glitter exploded in a cloud, coating him from head to toe. His movements froze, his body rigid, as he staggered back in shock. The glitter clung to him, covering his hair, his face, his clothes. It fell in a sparkling shower, shimmering and twinkling in the dim light of the room, like confetti at a party. Except this time, the party was for him. He stood there, completely still for a moment, caught in disbelief. His eyes wide, his mouth slightly open in shock. He was covered in glitter, a walking disco ball. His hands flailed in a frantic attempt to brush off the shining powder, but it was no use. The glitter had stuck to him like it was meant to. It clung to his skin, his clothes, his hair, making him look like a fool. I could hear his breath quickening as he cursed under his breath, his movements getting more frantic. He muttered something I couldn't make out as he tried to wipe the glitter from his face. But it was too late. It was already done. The trap had worked. Charlie was caught in his own web. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, the noise of the glitter still echoing in my ears. I had the evidence. He had walked right into my trap, and now there was no denying it. And yet, I still kept up the act. I acted confused, startled. I sat up in bed, blinking my eyes as though I had just woken up. The moment was finally here, and it couldn't have been more perfect. "What on earth?" I said aloud, my voice full of feigned confusion. I turned on the lamp next to my bed, casting the room in warm light, illuminating Charlie in all his glitter-covered glory. There he was, standing in the middle of my room, eyes wide in panic, his hands shaking as he tried in vain to wipe off the glitter. I couldn't help but smile to myself. It was a beautiful moment. The look on his face was priceless. He was a man caught, not just red-handed, but glitter-handed. And now, there was no escaping it. Charlie's eyes darted from the dresser to the bed, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to find a plausible excuse, a way to talk his way out of this. But there was nothing he could say that would change the truth. I watched him for a moment, letting the silence drag out. I let him struggle, let him squirm in his discomfort. Finally I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "Charlie," I said, pretending to still be half asleep. "What are you doing in my bedroom?" he stammered, trying to come up with a believable explanation. I heard a noise," he said, his voice faltering. "I thought someone was breaking in." I raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "Breaking in?" I repeated, my gaze lingering on the glitter that was now covering him completely. "And you ended up sparkling?" Charlie looked down at himself, finally seeing the absurdity of the situation. His clothes were covered in glitter, his hair shimmering like he had just stepped out of a craft store's worst nightmare. It was the final nail in his coffin. I couldn't hold back my smile now. "You ended up covered in what, exactly?" I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. He opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came out. He was trapped, not just physically, but mentally too. There was no excuse, no cover-up, no clever explanation could get him out of this one. At that moment, I heard footsteps coming down the hall. Lauren. She had heard the commotion, no doubt, and she was coming to investigate. Charlie's face went pale as he realized what was happening. He had been caught, and now there was no way to undo it. I smiled to myself, watching as he tried to think of something, anything, to say. But the glitter, the mess, the sheer ridiculousness of the situation made it impossible. His cover was blown. Tonight, I had caught Charlie in the act, and there was no going back. I sat up in bed, feigning surprise. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face calm, my expression one of confusion. "What on earth?" I called out, my voice pitched just right, loud enough to be startled, but not too much. I didn't want to give anything away just yet. Charlie, standing frozen in the middle of my room, was completely covered in glitter. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open, like he had no idea what had just hit him. His once confident demeanor had vanished, replaced by panic and disbelief. He was a man caught in the most absurd way possible, his plans unraveling in front of him with every second that ticked by. He didn't know what to do. His hands, still covered in glitter, fumbled in the air as though searching for an excuse. But no words came. His mind was racing, trying to come up with a plausible story to explain why he was standing in my bedroom at 3 a.m. covered in glitter. But nothing he could say would make any sense. He had walked right into my trap, and now there was no way out. I watched him, my gaze steady, my breathing calm. The satisfaction of seeing him caught, exposed, was sweeter than I expected. He had thought I wouldn't notice, thought I was just another old man who couldn't protect what was mine. But tonight, I had proved him wrong. I could hear Lauren's footsteps coming down the stairs. Her pace quickened, her heels clicking against the old wood floor as she hurried toward the sound. She must have heard the explosion, the burst of glitter that had filled the room like a confetti cannon. Charlie's eyes darted around the room, frantic, as he glanced toward the door. But it was too late. Lauren was already on her way. I knew she would be here any second. Charlie took a step back, his fingers wiping furiously at his face, trying to get the glitter off. But the more he rubbed, the more it clung to him. It was impossible to hide now. The evidence was all over him. I kept up my act, still pretending to be the confused, startled father. I didn't want to give him a chance to recover, to try to cover up what had just happened. The moment of truth had arrived. "Charlie!" I called again, my voice rising in feigned shock. "What are you doing in my room?" Lauren's footsteps grew louder, closer. She was almost here. I could feel the weight of the moment building as the distance between us closed. Charlie, still trying to gather himself, looked at me with wide eyes, like he was searching for the right words. "I heard a noise," he stammered, his voice weak. The confident, cocky man from earlier now nowhere to be found. I thought I was breaking in. The lie was pathetic. He couldn't even make it sound convincing. His explanation fell apart almost immediately. There was no breaking in. The door had been unlocked. He had been looking for something, had come into my room knowing exactly what he was doing. But now he was struggling, trying to cover his tracks, and it was only making him look more guilty. I could see the panic building in his eyes as Lauren's footsteps echoed down the hallway. She was almost here, and he knew it. This was the moment when everything would fall apart for him. Lauren reached the top of the stairs, her eyes wide and confused, still trying to understand what had happened. She saw Charlie first, his hands still brushing at his face, his clothes glimmering under the light, completely coated in glitter. It was a sight that would be hard to explain, no matter what story he tried to spin. "Charlie?" Lauren's voice was hesitant, a note of disbelief creeping in as she looked from him to me. "What are you doing in my father's room?" The weight of her question hung in the air like a brick. Charlie's mouth opened and closed, his breath coming in short, desperate bursts. He didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to say anymore. He stuttered, his usual arrogance completely gone. I thought I heard something, Lauren. I thought someone was trying to break in." His voice trailed off, weak, failing him. Lauren's eyes narrowed, studying him, taking in the full picture. She had been confused at first, but now it was all starting to fall into place. The glitter-covered figure in the middle of the room, the half-open drawer with the key missing, the strange, too casual explanations from earlier in the day, everything was finally making sense. Her face shifted, the confusion slowly turning into something else, something sharp, something I hadn't seen in her before. She took a step closer to Charlie, her voice now colder, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "Charlie, why are you covered in glitter?" she asked, her tone rising with every word. "What were you doing in my father's room in the middle of the night?" Charlie's eyes flicked between me and Lauren, panic spreading across his face like wildfire. His mind was working overtime, trying to come up with a way out of this. But every word he said only dug him deeper. His explanations were unraveling in real time, and there was no way for him to put the pieces back together. Lauren was no longer looking at him with the same trust. I could see it in her eyes, the shift happening right before my very eyes. Her protective instincts were kicking in. She wasn't just questioning him anymore. She was starting to see him for who he really was. And Charlie knew it. He backed away, his shoulders slumping, realizing there was no escaping this now. His voice became more frantic, his words tumbling out in a rushed attempt to make sense of everything. I wasn't," he started, but his words were too jumbled, too incoherent. He had no good explanation. The glitter was all over him, a physical manifestation of his guilt. It was too much for even him to cover up. Lauren took another step forward, her eyes locked onto him, her voice steely and firm. "No, Charlie. I need you to tell me the truth. What were you really doing in here?" Her voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and anger, but there was something else in her tone. Something I hadn't heard before. It was a quiet strength, a resolve. She wasn't going to let him manipulate her anymore. Charlie swallowed hard, his throat dry, and for a brief moment, he seemed lost. But the truth was already out there, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. His lies were crumbling in front of him, and now there was no way to undo the damage. "I thought I heard someone breaking in," he repeated again, but his voice was weak, trembling now. He knew he was lying. Lauren knew it too. I didn't need to say much. It was all there. His actions, his panic, the glitter that coated him from head to toe. It was all the proof we needed. Lauren looked at me, then back at Charlie, her face softening for just a moment, as if she were trying to make sense of everything. But then the truth hit her, and I saw it. The moment when the last remnants of her trust in him shattered. Her shoulders stiffened, and she took a step back from him, her eyes now hard and resolute. "No, Charlie, I know what you were doing. You were going through my father's things. You were planning to steal from him." Charlie's face twisted in disbelief, but Lauren didn't back down. She was done with his lies. "Get out," she said, her voice quiet, but the power behind it was unmistakable. "Get out of my father's house. Now." Charlie stood there stunned, glitter still falling from his hair in a glittering trail, but he didn't move. His gaze shifted from Lauren to me, a mix of fury and desperation in his eyes. I didn't mean for this to happen," he muttered, but his words were meaningless now. The truth had already been exposed. Lauren's gaze didn't waver. "Get your things, Charlie. You're not welcome here anymore." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Charlie's eyes. He knew. He knew it was over. I didn't need to say much. The truth had already started to unravel in the room, and the pieces were falling into place faster than Charlie could scramble to pick them up. As I watched the panic spread across his face, I felt a deep, almost sickening sense of satisfaction. It was finally time. I had everything I needed to expose him for the liar he truly was, and now there would be no more excuses, no more lies. I slowly reached for my phone on the nightstand, the one I had kept hidden beneath my pillow all this time. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what was coming. I had recorded Charlie's confession just 2 nights ago, and now I was about to make sure it was heard by the one person who needed to hear it the most. I looked at Lauren, my eyes locking onto hers before I pressed play. The phone speaker filled the room with Charlie's voice, clear, confident, casual, as if he didn't have a care in the world. It was him, his true self, exposed for the first time. "Yeah, it's me. Everyone's asleep. The old man's definitely loaded," Charlie's voice echoed in the room, and Lauren's face instantly froze. She wasn't expecting this. No one was. Her gaze dropped to the phone, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. And then something darker, a kind of pain I could never have imagined. The words on the recording hit her like a gut punch, and I saw her body tense as the betrayal took root. I couldn't watch her face without feeling the sting myself. But I needed to, because this moment of clarity for her, was the breaking point. Charlie's voice continued, oblivious to the devastation he was causing. "I found bank statements, investment portfolios, the whole thing. We're talking serious money here." He trailed off, his voice fading in and out as he spoke. But Lauren's grip on the phone tightened, and I saw her lips tremble as she struggled to understand the weight of what she was hearing. Then, the worst part came, the part that would surely tear her apart. Lauren's going to her book club meeting tomorrow night. She goes every Tuesday, 7 to 9. Gives us perfect timing. His voice was filled with a cold, clinical calculation, the same kind of calculated ease he had used when lying to her for months. But now, there was no masking it. Lauren's hand shook, the phone slipping slightly from her grip, and I could see it. The moment when the last of her trust in Charlie shattered, when the man she thought she knew crumbled into something unrecognizable. The world Lauren had built around her marriage, the safe cocoon she'd wrapped herself in, was breaking apart in front of her eyes. And it wasn't just the betrayal of a husband who had lied about his job or his supposed financial troubles. It wasn't just the casual way Charlie had been hiding his gambling debts from her. No, what cut deeper than all of that was the way he had dehumanized me. Lauren's face twisted as she heard Charlie's dismissive tone when he spoke about me. "The old fool keeps everything important in there," Charlie said, referring to my safe. "Cash, jewelry, probably more bank information. The bastard." That was the moment I could see her world crumble around her. She had trusted him. She had believed in him. And now she was hearing how he had discarded everything she believed in, how he had casually devalued her father, the man who had spent his life caring for her, protecting her. It wasn't just about the money. It was about how Charlie had seen us both as obstacles, something to manipulate, something to exploit for his own benefit. I saw it on her face before she even said a word. The hurt, the disbelief, the realization that she had been used, and I could feel that pain too in my gut as I listened to Charlie's words. But I couldn't allow myself to back down. Lauren deserved the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. The recording continued, and I knew the next part would be the hardest for her. "David's just some lonely old widower," Charlie's voice continued, dismissing me with that same casual cruelty. "Probably grateful for the company. He has no idea what's coming." Lauren's breath hitched, and I watched her face go pale as she heard Charlie's assessment of me. The man she had married didn't just see her father as a victim. He saw me as a fool too. He had been playing her all along, pretending to care, pretending to be the good son-in-law. But all the while, he had been making plans to steal from us both. And then came the part that broke her completely. "I already have the safe key. Grabbed it earlier today while they were having dinner. The old fool keeps everything important in there." Lauren looked at Charlie, her eyes wild with confusion and pain, trying to process what she had just heard. The betrayal cut so deep she couldn't even speak. Her voice was caught in her throat. "Lauren, don't listen to him," Charlie begged, stepping forward, but the panic in his voice was evident now, a sharp contrast to his earlier bravado. "I can explain. It's not what you think. Lauren held up her hand, silencing him with a single motion. She looked at him, but there was no longer any love in her eyes, only the cold, hard truth of what he had done. Her face was pale, but her resolve was unshakable. "No, Charlie. No more lies." Her voice broke as she looked at him, but there was no more hesitation. "How much, Charlie?" she asked softly, her voice shaking with the weight of her question. "How much did you owe? How much did you put us through for this?" Charlie stammered, his usual calm now shattered. His bravado was gone, replaced by desperation. "It doesn't matter," he muttered, trying to regain some control. but the damage had already been done. "No," Lauren said, her voice sharp now. "It does matter." "How much?" Charlie's shoulders sagged, and he let out a defeated breath. 47,000. The words hung in the air like a heavy, suffocating cloud. Lauren's face drained of color. She sank against the doorframe, her knees giving out as the full weight of Charlie's betrayal hit her like a punch to the gut. 47,000, she whispered. "You lied to me for months about everything, about the job loss, about the bills, about our finances. And all along, you were planning to rob my father? To steal from him?" Charlie looked at her, his eyes wild, but he had no words left. He was cornered now, and it was clear that there was no way out. "Why, Charlie?" Lauren's voice was barely audible. "Yeah, why didn't you just ask for help?" Charlie opened his mouth, but there was no explanation that would ever be good enough. Lauren stood up slowly, her eyes never leaving him. "Because of your pride, your greed." Charlie's eyes filled with frustration and panic. "Lauren, please," he begged, reaching out to her, but she pulled away, her face hardening. "No," she said firmly. "This is over. I'm done." She turned away from him, her voice steady as she spoke to me. Her father. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I moved towards her, offering a steady presence, knowing this was the moment she needed me the most. She had been broken by the person she loved, the person she had trusted, but it was time for her to see the truth. I gently took her hand. "You didn't know, sweetheart. You couldn't have." And just like that, the man who had come into our lives, who had been part of our family, was exposed for what he truly was: a liar, a thief, and a man willing to do anything to cover up his desperation. Lauren didn't need to say another word. The truth had come out, and now there was no going back. The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of everything that had just unfolded hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Lauren stood there, frozen, her eyes locked on Charlie as the truth settled over her like a storm. The man she had married, the man she had trusted with her love and her life, was gone. At least the version of him she thought she knew was. Her face was a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak, but most of all, there was a quiet determination. I could see it in the way her shoulders squared, in the way she held herself together, despite the weight of the betrayal she had just endured. Charlie, still standing in the middle of the room, covered from head to toe in glitter, looked completely defeated. His arrogance, his confidence, had been stripped away. He had nothing left to offer, no words to explain away his actions. He was a man exposed, no longer the charming son-in-law, but just a desperate thief who had underestimated the wrong person. He looked at Lauren with wide, pleading eyes. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He had no more excuses, no more lies to cover his tracks. He was standing in front of her, but there was nothing left to salvage. His mask had been torn away, and he was left with nothing but the glitter clinging to his skin, a permanent reminder of his dishonesty. And then Lauren spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, but there was a power behind it that I hadn't heard before. "Get out." It was simple. It was final. But those two words were all that was needed. The power in her voice, the weight of the truth, left Charlie no room to argue. His eyes flicked to me, then back to Lauren. But there was no more fight in him. His bravado had shattered. He knew this was it. His chance was gone. There was no coming back from this. Without a word, Charlie turned, his head hanging low in defeat. His shoulders were slumped. The image of a man broken, a man who had thought he could take advantage of kindness and love. The man who had believed he could manipulate and deceive his way through life was walking out the door with nothing but his shame and a trail of glitter marking his exit. Lauren and I stood there in silence, watching as he disappeared into the night. The front door slammed behind him, and it was over. Just like that, the man who had wormed his way into our lives was gone. Lauren turned to me, her face pale, her hands trembling, but her eyes were clear. There was no more doubt. She had seen Charlie for what he truly was. And in that moment, I saw something in her I hadn't seen before. Something stronger than the hurt. Something that wasn't just about betrayal. It was about resilience. We didn't say anything at first. Words didn't seem necessary. We had both been through a lot in the past few days, and the weight of it all hung between us. But then, after a long pause, Lauren stepped forward. She reached out and wrapped her arms around me, holding me tightly. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I pulled her close, holding her as tightly as I could. I didn't need to say anything. She didn't need to explain. I knew the depth of the pain she was feeling. I knew how much she had trusted Charlie, how much this had hurt her. But I also knew that we would be okay. We had been through worse. We had survived it. And we would survive this too. Charlie had thought he could break us. He had thought that by deceiving us, by using our love and trust, he could get away with his crime. But he hadn't counted on one thing. He hadn't counted on me. He hadn't counted on the fact that some old men bite back. And I had bitten harder than he ever expected. I held Lauren for a few more moments, feeling the steady rhythm of her breath against me. When she pulled away, her face was still pained, but there was a flicker of something else there too. Strength, clarity, the light of someone who had seen the truth, who had been wounded but was healing. "We'll be okay," I said quietly, looking her in the eyes. "You're not alone. You never were." She smiled weakly, nodding. "I know, Dad. I know." And then, in the silence that followed, I knew it wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning of something new. We were both stronger now. We had faced the worst of it, and now we could rebuild. As for Charlie, he had learned the hard way that some old men bite back. And maybe, just maybe, that lesson would stick with him. But that was no longer my concern. I had a new chapter ahead of me. Lauren and I had a new beginning. And this time, we would be smarter, stronger, together. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like we had shed something heavy that had weighed us down for too long. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden light through the window. It was the start of a new day, a new life, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Charlie's chapter in our lives had ended, but our story was far from over. And whatever came next, I knew we'd face it together.